Ladies and gentlemen, from a catacomb buried deep beneath the streets of the New World Order, this is the Remnant Underground. And now, here's your host, Michael J. Matt.
As a millennial, I took it upon myself to try to evaluate what's so wrong with our generation and why they're so mad at us. And then I pretty much realized that we're just existing. We're not really contributing anything to society. Our generation doesn't have the basic manners that include no ma'am and yes ma'am. We don't respect our elders. We don't even respect our country. We're stepping on our flag instead of stepping up to volunteer. And we idolize people like Kim Kardashian, and then we shame people like Tim Tebow. We're lazy. We're really entitled. And we want to make a lot of money and have free education, but we're not really willing to put in the work. We're more divided as a country than ever before. And I think our generation actually has a lot to do with that. Everything that used to be frowned upon is now celebrated.
Now, everyone is pretty much aware of this, except our friends in the Vatican. Team Bergoglio is actually polling these same poor, pathetic waifs, this whole generation, to find out from them, from this generation, what to do next, where to take the Catholic Church in the years to come based on input from these poor kids.
I giovani sono I protagonisti. Ma anche I giovani che si sentono agnostici, sì. Anche I giovani che hanno la fede tiepida, sì. Anche I giovani allontanati dalla Chiesa, sì. Ogni giovane ha qualcosa di dire agli altri, ha qualcosa di dire agli adulti, ha qualcosa di dire ai preti, alle suore, ai vescovi e al Papa. Tutti abbiamo bisogno di sentire voi.
What in the world can these poor kids offer other than ironclad proof every time that they open their mouth that the church has certainly failed an entire generation of young people, having dumbed them down in all things Catholic so completely that we actually now have millions of young Catholics who have no idea what the church teaches, how to pray the rosary, what the Mass is all about, that you're supposed to go to the Mass every now and then. They have no idea of any of it. And yet in a few months, Team Bergoglio, Pope Francis and company are going to have a synod, host a synod in Rome that will put the entire Catholic Church at the mercy of this most ignorant generation of Catholics, which seems to me to be a clear-cut case of the shepherd now following his lost sheep all around the pasture like a madman.
Pope Francis wants attendees to ponder the issues that cause youth to leave the church or abandon their faith, as well as to brainstorm creative solutions.
Un uomo e una donna che non rischia non matura. Una istituzione che fa scelte per non rischiare rimane bambina, non cresce. Rischiate, accompagnati dalla prudenza, del consiglio, ma andiamo avanti. Senza rischiare, sapete cosa succede? A un giovane invecchia, va in pensione a 20 anni. Un giovane invecchia e anche invecchia pure la Chiesa.
The Synod on Young People will happen in October, and in preparation for that, the youth who were, meticulously polled again over the past year by the Vatican sent hundreds of representatives to the Vatican 2 weeks ago to tell Pope Francis what they want him to do. And it's pretty amusing when you look at the details of this. Because what do they want? Well, for starters, they want, quote, a more transparent and authentic church where, quote, women play a greater leadership role and where obeying unreachable moral standards isn't the price of admission, end quote. Getting this, Rob?
Yeah.
Isn't that neat? Yeah, they're gonna tell us how it's gonna work. Because these are modern Catholics who can't possibly be expected to follow the rules that their grandparents lived by every day, all of their lives. It wouldn't work anymore. No, we're progressive Catholics. We've grown up. This was basically the message that these youngsters gave to the Vatican a couple of weeks ago. And this was at a week-long Vatican-initiated conference where 300 young people from all around the world went to Rome, and they were joined there by 15,000 more of young people online who were there for the single purpose of giving the older men who run the 1.2 billion member Catholic Church a piece of their mind, which is exactly what they did. And by all accounts, Pope Francis just ate it right up, even praising these kids for their tattoos at one point, which we mentioned down here last time. So at the last synod, you'll recall, how could you forget, that this was the Synod on the Family. We ended up getting from on high the permission for public adulterers to return to the sacraments without repenting. Well, we've gone over that in ad nauseum. That's what we got last time. At this next synod, the Synod on Young People, they are going to tackle such questions as the unequal roles of women in the church, which of course can be translated to it's time to ordain women deacons, maybe get some lady cardinals, eventually ordain women priests. That's what the kids want. And they're going to discuss this in Rome in a few months. This synod will also take on what the kids called excessive moralism, which according to the official document that they have now submitted to the Pope is, quote, driving the faithful away because out of touch church bureaucrats refuse to accompany their flock with humility and transparency, end quote. What are they talking about here? Have you seen any of these fire and brimstone priests lately, Rob?
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've seen anybody, or even heard of any priest that's not a traditionalist, a fraternity of St. Peter or something, talking even about heaven and hell, or morality, or premarital sex, whatever. They don't talk about anything anymore. And yet, so what are these kids talking about, I wonder? And by the way, what a coincidence. Because what the kids are talking about here is exactly what Pope Francis has been talking about for the past 5 years. That's a strange, strange coincidence. What else did they tell us? They tell the Pope. They told the Holy Father also that, quote, we, the young church, ask that our leaders speak in practical terms about the subjects such as homosexuality and gender issues, end quote. Well, of course, we knew that was coming. But now we're going to have to do something about this gay union issue because the children all around the world, the young people, have concluded that the church comes off way too severe in this regard, and its excessive moralism sends the faithful looking elsewhere for peace and spiritual fulfillment. Quote, we need a church that is welcoming and merciful, which appreciates the roots and patrimony, and which loves everyone, even those who are not following the perceived standards, end quote. But imagine the audacity of this. These kids coming to the Holy Father and telling him that they need the church to change. They need the church to change the rules. Imagine if this were a football team. Imagine if you had a certain segment of the football team, spring training comes along, or not spring training, but the beginning of the season comes along, and they go to their coach and they say, you know what, we want this to change. We don't want to follow the rules. We don't want you to push us so hard. We don't want to do sit-ups. We don't want to do push-ups. We don't want to do that. We want you to love us a little bit more. Be nicer to us. Can you imagine how long those kids that acted that way would stay on the football team? And they'd be history. You know, but this is completely normal for the Catholic Church. Have the sheep tell the shepherd what to do. Their reflections were formally presented to Pope Francis on Palm Sunday, just before Holy Thursday, when the Holy Father allegedly denied the existence of hell. It's been an interesting Holy Week. So all of this happened on Palm Sunday. And it will become one of the working documents that will guide discussions for the future of the Catholic Church come October. Now, I don't know about you, but this all just seems a little too perfect, doesn't it? I mean, these tragically dumbed-down kids suddenly putting together a game plan that's right in line with Pope Francis's revolution to change the Catholic Church in a way that can never, ever be changed back. You know, the other part of this that really bothers me, though, is that it's a tacit admission that the Church of Vatican II has been a colossal failure, such a failure, in fact, that it is now incapable of even keeping its own young people engaged and frequenting the sacraments. I mean, this is a stunning admission. I know they haven't seen it. They don't see it that way. But you can stand back and look at this and say, what in the world are they saying here? Look what they're admitting. What does this say about the massively dysfunctional Catholic family, worldwide family, just 50 years after the close of the Second Vatican Council? The Pope, way over in Rome now, has to do this cockamamie poll of the world's young people to see what they need and what they want and how the church can reach them? Holy cow! Because you think to yourself, well, what about the parents, Pope Francis, Your Holiness? What about these kids' parents? Wouldn't they know what their own children need from the Catholic Church? Might they not have a few suggestions that would be worthwhile? And what about all the priests of the world? What about the pastors? Wouldn't they have a pretty good idea of what's missing in the lives of young Catholics in their own parishes? Isn't that how the church works, hierarchically set up? Wouldn't it be a good idea to pull the priests and say, listen, we're losing our young people. What do you think for suggestions? Do you think you can help out? Well, those priests, they're right there. They baptize these young people. They watch them grow up. They heard their confessions, presumably. You think they might know these kids well enough to offer the Vatican some input. But instead, the Vatican wants to just pull the kiddies and act on that. This is really suspicious.
I gotta say, I love how they ask what they should do, and the response is lighten up on the reins.
Yeah.
Of course.
Exactly. What kid doesn't want that?
Right.
Lighten up. Let us do more fun stuff. And they're taking it seriously. But anyway, this is all for me anyway. And I guess, Rob and I are getting a little older, but it just seems way too rich. I mean, the Vatican we're talking about here, overseers of the largest child sex abuse scandal in the world, a sex abuse ring that they covered for a whole generation. These guys now are going to be trusted to reach out to the kids and rescue an entire generation of lost youngsters? Really? Where does this newfound concern for young people come from? I mean, the Vatican really should be hosting a synod called Keep the Young People Away from Us, because we haven't straightened anything out yet, right? Because, they've betrayed the kids in every way possible, again and again and again over the past 50 years. The Vatican simply cannot be trusted to do the right thing by young people anywhere or in any respect. As my friend, the late John Veneri, pointed out, I wouldn't trust Pope Francis to teach my kids their catechism lessons. Indeed, neither would I. And I got to tell you, Your Holiness, as a practicing Catholic father, I got to homeschool my own kids, drive about an hour one way to find a mass that isn't completely nuts. But I would say, as a faithful Catholic, I would say this to Team Bergoglio and the Synod on Young People, folks. Please, stay away from our kids. Seriously, guys, stay away from everybody's kids. Stop polluting young people with your modernist rot. You have no solutions. You've proven that again and again. You have no answers. In fact, you are the embodiment of the problem in the church today. You are the very last people on the face of the earth who should be deeming yourselves qualified to address the needs of young people. Now, turning to something a bit more positive. Right, Rob?
Right.
It's our new agenda to try to be more positive. Okay, positive. This week, in the wake of Pope Francis's scandal involving yet another friendly visit with his old atheist buddy, journalist Eugenio Scalfari, which we covered here last week, which also included the alleged papal denial of the existence of hell and the immortality of the soul, many Catholics after that, from Patrick J. Buchanan to Father Dwight Longenecker, and now, thank God, Cardinal Raymond Burke, they have had enough. And come to think of it, I guess, what do we have left for defenders of Pope Francis? I'm not sure. Mark Shea for sure. Maybe Michael Voris, Jimmy Akin over at Catholic Answers. That's about it. I mean, everybody else is waking up and they're done with this. So I think that's really a good sign. A good sign for the future, because it's not just Pope Francis. Pope Francis is the embodiment of the revolution of the Second Vatican Council, the spirit of Vatican II. And that's beginning to unravel as well. Over at the Remnant newspaper, Chris Ferrara has a story, an article on this startling new interview of Cardinal Raymond Burke by Riccardo Cazzaroli. I would encourage you to go over to remnantnewspaper.com and read this interview of Cardinal Burke, but just for the sake of tonight's program, I'll give you a couple of highlights. This is Cardinal Raymond Burke just a couple days ago. Quote, "What happened with the last interview given to Eugenio Scalfari during Holy Week and published on Holy Thursday went beyond what is tolerable. This playing around with faith and doctrine at the highest levels of the church rightly leaves pastors and faithful scandalized." End quote. The confusion and division in the church on the most fundamental and important issues marriage and the family, the sacraments and the right dispositions to receive them, intrinsically evil act, eternal life, and the last things are becoming increasingly widespread. And the Pope not only refuses to clarify things by proclaiming the constant doctrine and sound discipline of the Church, but he is also increasing the confusion, end quote. Quote, a Catholic must always respect in an absolute way the Petrine office as an essential part of the institution of the Church by Christ. This respect also includes the duty to express the judgment of a rightly formed conscience to the Pope when he deviates or seems to deviate from true doctrine and sound discipline, or to abandon the responsibilities inherent in his office. If the Pope does not fulfill his office for the good of all souls, it is not only possible, but also necessary to criticize the Pope, end quote. Thank you, Cardinal Burke, for again making it clear what we must do. Let's stay away from the told you so attitude. We were here first. We've been saying it all along. Who wants to hear that? Nobody wants to hear the told you so thing. So knock it off and try to find people who are beginning to wake up and just help them to get on the team. Help them to join us. That's the whole point, to join the army of God in resisting the modernist revolution. And let's agree to do what we can to support the few courageous members of the hierarchy who are preparing now to embark on the most difficult and indeed dangerous mission of their priestly lives, folks. Resisting Peter to his face. So it's easy. I know. It's easy for us to get on our little internet websites and blog sites and we shout anti-Pope and false prophet and all that. Rend our garments on the internet over how bad and terrible Pope Francis. That's easy. But it takes prudence. It takes prayer and constructive strategizing for members, especially of the hierarchy, to understand and to find the most effective way to oppose what is happening. Without scandalizing more of the sheep, more of the faithful, who have already been scandalized enough. That's what concerns Cardinal Burke. Can't you see it? It's written all over his face. His concern is about widening the schism, scandalizing the sheep. And we can get behind that. You got to support him. You got to pray for him. Because everyone has a role in this, and that role does not look the same for laymen as it does for princes of the Church. So with God's help, we're going to continue to keep the pressure up and leave the formal, final judgment of Francis to God, to the Church, to a future Pope. It's not up to us to make that judgment. We intend to win the war against Pope Francis and his crazy revolution, not lose it. And so we thank God for Cardinal Burke, for Bishop Schneider, and for all the priests and bishops who are speaking out already and who I believe are going to speak out even more in the weeks and days to come. May God grant them the grace and the courage to do what must be done. And may God grant us, the little laymen, the grace and the courage to be humble, to be patient during this most critical moment in the history of the Catholic Church. Please pray for Pope Francis, pray for Cardinal Burke, and we'll see you next week.